to grind. It's when an individual pushes his or herself to work hard and hustle to attain a goal, dream, or outcome. And on this show, we feature people from all industries about what they do, how they do it, and the grind behind their success. This is GrindMode. Hello, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to another episode of Grind Mode here with Patrick Kofi Austin. And today we get to have a good friend, and I would like to say definitely a mentor of mine, Mr. Keith Williams. He is a entrepreneur himself. He has done so much, and he actually trains and teaches other entrepreneurs about things to do and the best steps and actions of being an entrepreneur. So we're going to bring Keith on to the stage right now. Hey there, Keith. How are you doing today, man?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for coming on Grind Mode.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for the kind words.
They're all true words, Keith. No, seriously. And before we get started, I want to just thank you because there's in the middle of one of my transitions of entrepreneurship and working fresh out of the matrix, was lucky enough to get introduced to Keith and help him create a really cool product that we tried to take to market. And so first and foremost, just thank you for that opportunity. I learned a lot. And, with that being said, Keith, because that kind of takes us into, your start. For people that don't know you, tell them about you and tell them a little bit about, how you got started in entrepreneurship and things like that.
Sure thing. Well, if you want to go all the way back to the beginning.
Let's go all the way back.
So, I grew up in a small town and in some pretty humble beginnings. And the first thing I remember doing that kind of had an impact and put some cash in my pocket was when I was in sixth grade. I actually went to a school that looked like the little 3-story salt box brick school building like in the movie Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that's it could have been filmed in that building. So it was real interesting just from, that old time feel. But at the time, this was about 1980, 81, and you could buy a pack of Bubblicious gum for 25 cents, and you could buy the Jolly Rancher sticks for a dime a piece. And I realized that most kids are carrying around a dime or a quarter in their pocket. So if you look at the bubble gum, there's 5 pieces in that. I charge a dime a piece, double the money on every pack sold. For the fire sticks and the apple sticks, you could buy those for a dime a piece.
Yeah. I
could sell those for a quarter. And this grew big enough inside of this tiny little school that I actually had kids from all grades being franchisees.
There you go.
And I could clear profit of $20 a day. So, a sixth grader with an income of, what would that be? $100 a week.
Yeah. In 1981, that's a lot of money.
That was a lot of money. And, my hometown is very small. We had a little local grocery store. And what I would do is I would take my saxophone out of the case and I would hide it in a locker somewhere in the school. And then I would take my case to the grocery store and literally fill it up with candy. And after a few weeks of doing this, the cashiers hated it because this was before when, all the scanning and stuff was, right?
Right, you had to ring each
one. So they were
one.
having to ring all this up. One of them got sick of this, went into the office of the grocery store and came out with the wholesaler's catalog and said, I think you just need to start ordering direct. And so anyway, it was funny. I ended up getting busted by the principal because technically candy in school was not allowed. Thank goodness I didn't discover drugs or anything like that.
Right.
But it was nice while it lasted. So that was kind of the first foray, and gave me a pretty good taste on what it means to be an entrepreneur, and kind of pull some cash in and start something from scratch.
Wow. Yeah, that and more I meet people, I think we all kind of have the similar story. Mine was baseball cards.
Yeah. Yep.
That was the first one for me. And to realize that, oh, I can go get X, buy them in bulk, and go ahead and buy the boxes and buy the case, because eventually I'm going to get the cards I know that are worth enough money to sell.
Right. Yeah,
and make my money back.
Yes. Have somebody else pay for your collection.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what happened. People paying for my collection. Wow. So starting with that, and then of course you you go to college, and you become and something that I've learned about Keith is he is a very good musician that a lot of people do not know.
I've fallen a long way down at this point.
So tell us about how going through like I said, going through college and going through music and being somewhat creative has got you actually kind of along with your degree got you into the space of entrepreneurship. Was there something that taught you that really drove you at that point in time? Now, I mean, because it sounds like you were naturally an entrepreneur. What really got you into thinking, okay, this is something I need to do for a living? Because you've started businesses, plenty of them. Like how did where did that come from?
Well, I think some of that is very much driven by the humble beginnings, right? Because I didn't have a whole lot of walk around cash in college, so my friends going out, and my freshman year roommate, his dad was one of the top people in I forget which steel company, right? And he went to private boarding schools, and he would get into all sorts of trouble, and his parents would just come bail him out all the time. And I mean, you could have made a '80s Brat Pack movie out of my freshman year in college. I kid you not. And some of the stuff that we got up to is, I still shake my head at. But, there was always just something that I felt, I knew I was always delivering more into companies as I was working for either salary or hourly than what my paycheck represented. And I think that was always kind of the thing that drove me, honestly. And I at one point I had started a little company. I was running out of my apartment bedroom, and I had gotten some magazine ad space. I learned how to publish advertising, which then was not nearly as easy as it is now. Right now, you can sit down with Photoshop or whatever, and you bang stuff out. Back then, you're actually talking about getting, the camera-ready artwork and reducing things down to negatives, and submitting that to the publisher in the right way. Excuse me. And when I launched that, when those advertisements hit, it was kind of a shock. How do I deal with the influx of people calling me and wanting to order and stuff like that? And then how do you set up that whole side of things? Well, that kind of caused me to kind of step back and pull the plug on there. But what I did do after that was write a business plan and enter it into the Burton D. Morgan business competition at Purdue. And now there are versions of that all over the place. But back then, there were very few business plan competitions. I ended up winning that. Burton Morgan actually had a little venture capital company. And he was the first one up to talk with me after my presentation and said, how would you like to have a partner? So, I'm in my early 20s and accidentally raised a round of venture capital. And, it was just a whole nother world to be in there and to execute and to try to grow something and to learn the difference between building a business and, and building a company.
See, and I'm glad you said that, because I think for a lot of us entrepreneurs, including myself, I've always found myself building a business, not necessarily building a company, because it seems like there is a huge difference on actually the reasons why you set up a business compared to set up a company, which is something that now obviously you're a specialist in. But we're going to get back to that later. But tell us about this little company that you actually sold some product to NASA.
Oh, well, just trying to think through kind of the order of things. So I had some.
Wait, okay. So you had more businesses before this that you've created and failed, because we all failed before you had this win. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The funny thing is, you hear people talk about, it takes 10 companies until you actually have a successful one. And the company that you're talking about here was my 10th. I won't say company, but 10th time trying to do something entrepreneurial. And it struck me as so funny that is exactly what it took. If you go all the way back to sixth grade and selling candy, from there forward, that was the 10th company or 10th business.
Nice.
So I had some pretty decent tech background and what I had worked with and on the East Coast in the mid to late 90s, doing unmanned reconnaissance drones for the military. And part of what I was tasked to do was to fix their manufacturing system, which was just in shambles. And so part of the thing that were things that were consistently failing for this particular product and company were wire crimp connections. So, the wire harness inside of this thing, and we would routinely have a drone go belly up, into the Chesapeake Bay or somewhere else, because the wire broke inside, right?
Oh, yeah. And especially then, I mean, even even if this was 6 years ago, that's really expensive.
That was about $75K.
Yeah.
Happened.
Boom.
These were
into the peak.
Big boy toys.
Right.
They could fly out 100 miles.
Wow.
And back. So it was an interesting thing. But anyway, that gave me some background. And a number of years later, I don't remember how I stumbled across it, but I saw a licensing solicitation around some technology that was invented by NASA. And because of that previous background and some other, I had done some work in a medical device company around ultrasonics. And in particular, we were measuring flow rate of liquids through a tube. Those two things just gave me a very unique perspective on this technology that was up for license. And I talked with NASA for a good couple of years and finally convinced them to sign over a license or give me access to the technology via a license. And when we finally inked the licensing arrangement, that was 2010. And I ended up then refining the technology more, creating more intellectual property around it. Got a couple of joint patents with NASA. I had the opportunity to go out to NASA Langley in Virginia and
Nice.
actually work directly at their facility, which was really cool. I was really into
That,
space growing up, so um,
wow.
being able to check that kind of bucket list thing off was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started to work through, I had identified three pretty significant companies that might be interested in the technology and started to approach them one by one. And ultimately I was trying to create kind of an auction environment to get somebody to really buy into this thing. But the last one that I pulled in was Tyco Electronics. And it took about 18 months of that 3-year period of having the company to convince them to acquire my company and fold it into theirs. And there's just crazy, crazy stories I could tell you about.
I'm sure. Wow, that's awesome. And that's like, I think that's the one thing, from, getting to talk to you, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that might watch this or are entrepreneurs, especially in the space. The time it takes and really the processes and the things that you have to do to create your product, create your company, and then position yourself in the right way to sell it is a lot. There's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into this. Um, and
Let me say this. I did not start that company with the target to sell it.
oh, okay,
I started it because I wanted,
solve a
this to
problem.
be something, a solid employer in the community. It's high tech. It brings a lot of interesting things in. And, I just wanted it to be a good steward to the community.
Right. Okay.
But um, it was becoming very apparent that I had not raised enough money around this company to do everything that needed to get done with it. So it was either I start to find somebody who's going to invest a lot of money into it or outright sell the company. And
Which
we
makes
ended up selling it.
in the entrepreneur space. I mean, and now it seems like the venture capitalist people out there, the process of creating companies and creating products or the value seems to be like a norm. At some point in time, this was not norm. Tell us about about the times of when this was not a normal thing. Because now you can almost go to any major city in America and find either a work tech spaces where this is what is done there. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, 90s, even early 2000s, even when I went to Purdue, that was 99, 2000, that time. This stuff wasn't even available. Like the information was so hard to find. How did you learn all that? How did you get to learn all this and find these people?
Um, Finding them is kind of what you do now anyway, which is network a lot, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But I will say that there has been a major shift on the acceptance of doing something out on your own. So
Yeah.
after winning the business plan competition and getting some amount of investment from the little VC firm, all of this was kind of headline news locally. So I was giving interviews to the local newspaper, things were being followed, the local TV station. And it got to the point where people would recognize me on the street. And you know how people like to stick their nose in where it doesn't really belong. I literally
Yeah.
would have people stopping me on the street, or if I go to the mall, stopping me in there. And there was this clear dividing line. One half was, this is so awesome. I wish I had the ability to go out and do my own thing. And the other side, because I did drop out of school to pursue this, the other side was, what are you thinking? You've got such a great career path laid out for you. You go back to school, get your degree, go find a company to work for. You'll be a vice president within a few years. You'll be set for life. You just get on the treadmill and, away you go.
Right.
And you're right that it's definitely, a lot of places try to emulate, Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, and do that because of the successes that do spin out of there. What a lot of incubators or investors or whatever, the Midwest is pretty conservative,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah,
don't,
definitely.
it used to be, if you trip and fall down on your first startup, you're just screwed.
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah, because word gets around, and you've got failure. And there are other places around the globe. France is pretty notorious for kind of having the same kind of operating procedure. If you fail with a startup in France, you're blackballed.
Wow.
It's pretty much how it goes. It seems like they're starting to turn away from that viewpoint, but it's tough. It's tough.
And it seems like, just as, an entrepreneur side of that, and that's sad to hear, and really true for the Midwest. It kind of seems like, I think it's getting better. I've had to move several times to try new things without feeling like if I did them here in the Midwest, that if I failed, that exact thing would happen. Like I never would have a chance if I failed at something I was doing to actually ever go get a job, a regular job.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's one of those where you kind of feel like you're boxed into one certain thing, and I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is like you just don't have to stay in the same space with everything you do, which is one of the great things that I like about you too, and learning more about you is that you've been an entrepreneur in several different spaces, and this one had to do with space. And then your next one, in engineering, your next one has something to completely do with your passion, which was music. And that's how I met you.
Right. Absolutely.
So like, kind of, give us some, what should entrepreneurs do that are into multiple things? I mean, unlike marketing, because I do some marketing things too, it's, pick a niche, and target that niche, because when you're creating a product, same thing. But in entrepreneur space, like I find that you build off of every different type of thing you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true, or am I kind of off base with that? Or
No, I think if you kind of understand the macro parameters that you're kind of operating within, at the bottom line, you're as a company, you're trying to deliver value and you're trying to be compensated for that value that you're delivering, and it doesn't matter if that is in an app space or in a product space or anywhere else. That's what you're trying to get to. I wouldn't necessarily say just jumping from thing to thing to thing is
right.
A perfect storm, but I think if you were to lay out a lot of the companies and startups that I've been a part of, there's always some amount of a common thread that runs through them. And so there's an innate understanding. It's just, the bottom line that goes along in things. And then if you have at least some amount of background that you can relate to into that, then I think typically you can kind of maneuver around and be successful in there. But I don't know. I don't know anything about running, say, a tow truck company, right?
Right.
I could go out and research, what are the metrics that you need to fall within to be successful here, and other things. But um, I know that you're providing a service and you're getting paid for it. But that's about all that I know in terms of that business model. So I think if you're fairly smart and bright, that you can adjust and find your way into opportunities. But none of those jumping around from my standpoint was I completely a fish out of the water. Like
Right.
the NASA company
They all
was large,
compounded on each other.
right,
I
because of
see.
past experiences. The the music app company um, was actually somebody else's idea, and where what I did was I brought some amount of maturity in to try to put that company on the right path. I had just made a lot of other people very happy with the returns of selling the NASA Tech company, and so it was very easy for me to um, raise investment into that at the very beginning. Through connections that I had, I got us an invitation to launch from the Kauffman Foundation stage at South by Southwest, which is, a pretty big
Huge.
accolade, right?
That's huge. Yeah.
But it was all leveraging off the contacts and my limited experience into the music industry, and it was very limited, but it was some.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think you just try to connect the dots and see if you can make it make sense.
How big would you say networking is to entrepreneurship? Because I know like this is one mistake that I've made that I've just really realizing within the last couple of years is I don't use my network as much as I probably should or could. It seems like an ongoing thing is like it's a network and being able to connect other people that you know and even people that you need to know for your service or product or company that you're creating. Is
Right.
that seem like to be an underlying thing that all entrepreneurs should really be looking into?
Um, Absolutely. And, back to what you were saying in terms of times having changed and opportunities being larger for entrepreneurs now. Um, when we were trying to make a go with the app company, and for anybody who's watching this that isn't local, we set about an hour to Indianapolis and about 2.5 hours to Chicago. And I was taking a lot of time to drive to an event in Chicago. Those nights were terrible because I typically leave at the end of business day. Chicago's an hour earlier for us, so I can make it to an event 6:30 in downtown Chicago, do the event, drive back home. I usually get home 2, 3 a.m., crash, get up the next morning, be back in the office, at a respectable time. But it was just something that you had to do to, be out there talking, be out there hustling, getting people excited about what you're doing. Um, and, it just takes time and effort.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember several times driving literally on the highway 24 hours, 7 hours from Atlanta to here to come meet with you guys and go do something and then come back and then drive back to Atlanta.
Absolutely.
And it was painful for us, you guys out there. It was really rough, but it was worth it, and I think that's because I think we were all passionate about what we were trying to do and accomplish. And I think that's the one thing I definitely like in the entrepreneur space is that most of the time the people that are doing it are really actually passionate about it. So the hard work doesn't actually seem like work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know.
definitely. Well, when things are going good, it's fantastic.
True. When it's bad,
When it's bad, it's really, really bad.
you're about this far from jumping off a bridge, but or telling yourself you're going back into the Matrix, which, you guys are going to hear that a lot on this show, going back into the Matrix, and that is
Yeah.
going to go sit at a desk and doing the same thing over and over again for less than what you're worth. That's what
Right.
we call the Matrix. But with that being said, so after that, you were able to go to Purdue and be a part of the school entrepreneuring over there, consulting with other startup companies and entrepreneurs and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that and your experience with that opportunity.
So technically, my title was entrepreneur in residence, which anyone that's been out trying to raise funds, a lot of venture capital funds actually have that title for a member of their staff as well. And typically, what the idea for that person is to be somebody with a decent amount of experience that can really help impact entrepreneurs on their journey. And it, it was a great thing to do, just to try to give back and help some other people along. I was kind of positioned in a strange place in there where it felt like um, um, I'm trying to say this in a way that won't be taken wrong by somebody. Um, because my background was so varied, I got a lot of different people coming through compared to what probably um, the entrepreneurship center
Was looking for.
was targeting. Right? They they
Right.
they
Yeah.
were really asked by the university and the other groups around the university to help move high impact startups through that could leverage off of Purdue intellectual property to grow them that much faster.
That makes. Yeah.
And so a lot of what I did were people considering maybe doing a Kickstarter campaign or something else. So it was a great time doing that. Um, Ideally, what would happen is entrepreneurs in residence would get attached to a company and actually leave the entrepreneurship center to go join as a CEO, COO, CFO, whatever, of one of these high velocity startups. And that's actually what happened with me when when I parted ways with the entrepreneurship center. There was a company that we were starting up. I was going to license tech out of Purdue and kind of grow that. What happened in the middle of that whole scenario were just some things out of our control. The professor who had invented the technology decided to take a position at another university, so he wasn't going to be an active part of the team. The postdoc that he had been working on with over several year period, who understood the technology and the equipment and how to run it, he ended up essentially being recalled to his home company, our
Oh.
country.
Oh man.
And so that left me and another individual local, and it was just going to be too rough of a climb. And like, yeah,
Yeah,
this
man, that
it
stinks.
changes all the dynamics of what we had set up with the company, and we're like, that's just too much of a risk now. And yeah, we just kind of turned around and walked away from
I
that
had to walk away
opportunity.
from that, and that's and that sucks. And I remember you slightly kind of give me that story, but now remembering that, yeah, that's bad. And I mean, I guess that's, for what you're doing now, you have now gone to the space of more consulting and more the help the building and like the dynamics of a team is huge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Especially I think in a startup or an entrepreneur space. Um, you know, just briefly, how does someone kind of go about finding out how to make sure that you have the right dynamic in a startup?
Oh, wow.
I mean, I know it's not a brief question to answer,
Well,
but
honestly, this is a big part of where the networking comes into play,
okay,
because you have to be out there kind of trying who can be a good friend to you, right? This is somebody you're going to, um, live, breathe, um, and just experience this whole process with, right? If somebody's not good to be around, it's just gonna it's going to make things unbearable.
yeah,
And understanding that up front is just huge. But on the other hand, we've got to be careful if you're just two buddies, too chummy with somebody that you want to pull in, partially because they're your friend. You want to see them be successful alongside of you. Sometimes that can be an impediment as well, because you start giving them too much slack and everything else. And it can just be a terrible, terrible thing, and it can just permanently damage the friendship.
right,
Right. So
yeah. Or you don't have that, or you don't, or yeah, because it's different. Because sometimes you just have to be rough and honest with each other on
yeah,
when you're dealing with, I mean, a business. Yeah,
yeah,
so that definitely, I've definitely dealt with that one a couple
yeah.
times.
One of the good things to do, and it, there's a book that preaches all of this called The E-Myth. If you haven't read that, but
Okay.
it's been around for a long time at this point. But one of the things that the author talks about is sitting down and actually writing the job descriptions and the position titles. And most of the people I know in operating in successful startups, they don't care what the title is. But you can operate without it 99% of the time. But when you start getting into these conflict modes with your partners, your friends, family members, whomever, if you have all signed off on the titles and the roles and responsibilities and who reports to whom, it gives you the power to say, hey, you're not holding up your end of the bargain here, right? And
Right.
because I hold this title and in the company, it is over your position. You agreed to all this up front. Then, we need to fix this, or maybe there needs to be a transition out for you, or to find another position for you. But handling things preemptively just fixes so many situations early on. I'll give you a really good example. So one of the companies that I was the mentor for, entrepreneurs and residents for, was a SaaS company that I won't say what they were delivering, because I don't want anybody to get their feelings hurt. But I was asked to go through, their business, their operations. What things should we address? Well, this entrepreneur had pulled in a friend, a loose friend, more of an acquaintance, to be the CTO of the company. And I was looking at everything, how everything was set up and was running. And I said, the first thing you need to do is to get your code base onto a server that you control, with backup rules that you control, because if there is ever a situation where something goes south, this developer can just pull the plug and you're done.
Right.
And the entrepreneur was like, yeah, well, I'll get around to that sometime. 6 months later, I kid you not, they had a squabble. He turns around, I'm done. Literally pulls the cable out of the server. Server's mine. You can't have your code anymore. Killed the company instantly.
Yeah. Wow.
But if you'd been, somebody
Proactive.
proactive, they could have just headed that all off. It probably would have allowed them to put more definitions around what the other person was putting in, the value that they were creating, because there ended up being a huge squabble about, hey, I should be getting more stock in the company. What I'm doing has more value than what you're offering me. And so, he kind of had the last say there. But there were a lot of things like that where you could see, a train wreck coming from a couple miles away, that this is what's going to happen.
Right.
The entrepreneur, no, is we all right? And of course, then it happened, and
So
no,
yeah. Right.
I told you so. Right?
Yeah. Note to self for everybody watching: listen to your advisor if you hire an advisor, because there's probably they're probably a person that's looking at it objectively. I mean, not objectively, or whichever way it's supposed to be. Not like you are looking at it.
Right. Right. And I've also had instances where maybe I didn't have a full understanding of the market space, or this aspect or that aspect, and I pushed on companies, no, don't do that, but they had some insight that I didn't see.
Right.
That, well, thanks for your advice. We're going on how we plan to go on, and they ultimately ended up being pretty successful.
Nice. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, that's okay. Well,
So
then there you go.
Nobody's in fault.
No one's in fault, but right.
If an advisor is bringing something up, saying, "I've seen this happen before," or I could see this hole, in your business model or financial model, it's probably something that you need to take an objective look at.
Right. Definitely. And I'm glad the E, what was it called? What was the name of that book again?
Oh, the E-Myth?
The E-Myth. Okay, the E-Myth. I'm going to make sure I go check that out, and just for, add some more knowledge to my Audible. I'm more of a listener than a reader, because I try to do too much all at once, because that's kind of what we do, unfortunately.
Right. The other good book, if you're kind of a fledgling entrepreneur, or are heading towards launching a startup, I would highly recommend The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and it's by Ben Horowitz out in Silicon Valley. Okay. And he writes with I don't want to say passion, but he does not sugarcoat what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And I know that, as I was reading his book, this was fairly shortly after I'd sold the company. I was like, this guy gets it. He truly gets it about how hard it is, and gives examples of all the things that you're juggling and trying to deal with. And how, as the CEO or the founder of the company, you have to hold so much on your shoulders that it can just be soul crushing, because you cannot be completely transparent with everybody that's working or with or helping you on moving things forward, because it'd be so demotivating to them, right?
Yeah, it's too much, right? Too much to.
And one of the things that was always hard for me to wrap my mind around until, I don't know, over about the last 12 to 15 years, is you cannot go around just blasting negativity, right? Because the negative side could happen.
Right.
You
don't want to speak it to fruition.
I don't have a crystal ball, you know, we can work just as hard and have a positive outcome as this negative outcome. And anyway, he gives some great examples of that. Yeah, he talks about just viscerally going into his office and locking the door and curling up in a fetal position on the floor and crying.
I've been there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so
Yeah, definitely been there. Okay, well that's definitely a good one, and yeah, I'll have to check that out too.
yeah.
With that being said, you're talking about the heavy heartedness of moving forward as a founder, CEOs of being an entrepreneur and startup. Right now, unfortunately during the times we are dealing with the social aspects of being a business owner and entrepreneur and the responsibilities we have with that. What would you tell an entrepreneur right now that's, we have a lot going on about, interweaving either your business with social issues and social change, where's the line, where's not the line, what should we be thinking about and what should we be doing during this time?
That's a really just generally hard question. Um, if you're going to put something out on behalf of your company, I would say make it very heartfelt and authentic and not just words, right? So how can you impact this? What are you seeing? Um, we've if you scroll through like LinkedIn and the feed there, you'll see both sides of that. You'll see companies that absolutely get it and they're being very authentic, and this is how we're trying to combat this and try to improve the societal biases that are out there. And then you have others that they're kind of acknowledging what has happened, but they're kind of hollow words, right? And that's kind of just the outward facing message. But at the end of the day, more than the message, it's about acknowledging our society and our society's faults, and understanding how to address some of that. There are, I guess if I could make one
Okay.
statement here about this would be, there are very few people in this world, in this country, who are actively sitting out there plotting how to screw somebody over or
Right.
how to, mess somebody else's life up.
Yeah. Very,
There are
very, very,
tons,
very few.
yeah,
Yeah.
there are tons of people that are looking at events that they've got a lifetime of viewpoints that they've acquired, and they don't even know what all they're carrying around inside of them for biases or why don't people just pull themselves up by the bootstraps, or why don't people just move to a nicer place? Well, you can't necessarily do that if you're just struggling to feed yourself and your family and keep a roof over your head. You don't have $2,000 for a new security deposit. You don't have $500 for a moving van. You don't have the deposits on new utilities going, to
Right.
another place, right?
Right.
So, somebody that's been brought up in a more well-established or secure socio-economical place don't understand how people can't just necessarily pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Right.
And I hear a lot of people saying, "Well, I'm not a racist." Well, fortunately, I don't think there's tons and tons of people being actively racist, but there's a whole lot of people that don't realize their thoughts, their actions, even things that they say how that could inadvertently be viewed in those ways.
Right.
And,
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, because I think that a lot of people just don't realize that even what they say could be, even if they don't recognize that they are or not, a racist or a bigot, because it happens on the other side. Let's just also make sure
right.
I make sure I say that, at least make sure I say that, that they don't realize that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, talking about kind of both sides, absolutely recognize the Black Lives Matter, and the fact that, saying that and demonstrating around that does not take away that anybody else's life does not matter.
Correct.
It's about calling attention, to this issue that we're all going to have to work together to address.
Right.
And, I can kind of see where some people are coming from around the kneeling and the whole thing. But just like a white person, not necessarily understanding where some things are coming from the other side, and what issues need to be addressed. You do have people that are saying, when I see somebody kneeling in the middle of, the national anthem and stuff, I associate it with this. And I think we need to start understanding that different people view different things in different ways. And it does not necessarily, we just all need to be kinder and more understanding to one another, right? Like a lot of people see the kneeling as we're calling attention to this issue, and it's obviously working because we're making people uncomfortable with this action. And because of that uncomfortableness, we hope to reap some amount of benefits from that. The other side's having this visceral reaction, not the whole other side, but some people having the other reaction where, this is something they're very proud of patriotically, especially people that have served in the military. And just need to be honest and aware that we are all looking at things from, our own viewpoints.
Right. And I definitely will say yes on that. And there's several people out there that have said that initially had a certain response to just that thing. That then were like, oh, well, really, that's not what it was about, and then, okay, now I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about, okay, my knee jerk reaction is X. Okay. But then once I've been told and shown, okay, that's not what it was about, then saying, right, okay, now I can see where they're coming from. And that's the beauty of what America is supposed to be about, and right, what, us as
having a discourse.
Yeah. And you be able to do that. And that's the beauty of it. And, and be able to, like I said, to understand that and change on that. And understand where the other person's coming from. So, and as a business, like you said, like you just have to be able to express that and be wholeheartedly about that. And that is very good advice, Keith.
Yeah. It's not about making a statement and, saying, hey, we're with you. It's, maybe it's just the smallest little thing that you can deliver out there, that just shows that you are, don't want to even say understand, but that you are empathetic with the situation, and you're going to do something small to try to help out.
Yeah, what you can, big or small. Correct. I hear that. But that's what's up with that, Keith. But before we go, obviously time's almost up. What's up next for you, Keith? What's the next thing for you? What's or what are you doing right now that you like to tell the viewers and listeners?
Well, there's two things that have kind of happened here pretty recently. One is let me tell the story from the beginning of where this came from.
Awesome.
Um, so originally, I went to school for engineering at Purdue, um, but I wasn't really enjoying that experience. And so one day I was walking through the student union, and there was an exhibition going on, and it had the undergraduate and graduate industrial design student exhibition. So there were like crazy car models, made out of clay, and was furniture design, and there were, all of these product designs that, I'm looking at this stuff, and it's so hands-on and so visceral, and I loved the sketching and the rendering. At that time it was marker rendering because nobody had,
Right. Tech. Right. Yeah.
right. So
3D stuff.
yeah, so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where I ought to be. And at the same time, I was also really considering uh, transferring to a music school. And I had the ability to play on stage with Dennis de Blasio, who was Maynard Ferguson's baritone sax player. And we hit it off really well. He was doing a master class, and there were a lot of people there. And um, I was actually chosen to do a lot of improv, kind of one-on-one stuff with him, and was pulled him aside and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this, going to music school for performance." He's like, "Yeah, come out to New Jersey. You can study under me." Because he was professor, and this is right outside of New York. But it was a really I had a very tumultuous time around that point in my life. There just maybe over beer we can talk about something.
Yeah.
But it was going to be super hard for me to transfer out of Purdue, just emotionally.
Right.
And so what I did, I was really interested in the industrial design program. And I went and met with one of the professors, and he's just like, "Oh, you're in engineering? Engineers don't do well in this. They almost always flunk out or drop out of our program. Plus, you'd have to start from scratch, because our curriculum doesn't really line up with the engineering one. So you'd have to go back and start from scratch." So anyway, I did not transfer into industrial design at that point. Just a lot of things started to happen a couple of years ago. We call it midlife crisis, whatever. So I actually applied to go back to school for a master's in industrial design. And the first time through the application process, I was actually denied. So I was dinged. And went in and was talking with the professors, and finally I just beat them down and wore them down. They're like, "All right, here's the deal. We'll conditionally let you come in and take a couple classes, and then our entire staff will judge if you are worthy to continue on in the program."
Wow.
And so I took 2 or 3 classes one semester. It was reviewed and ultimately allowed into the program. So I've spent the last couple of years finishing that, and also trying to keep my head above water otherwise. And so my thesis was just signed off on a few weeks ago. So technically, the master's program is done and put away. Trying to think, I don't want to publicly talk too much about the entrepreneurial opportunity that I'm working through right now.
Yeah.
I found some software that was mothballed and sitting on a shelf, and it's essentially a software as a service model. And there's another local company that could really use that. And it would fit straight in with their market and start generating a lot of cash flow. And so we're actually negotiating through a deal right now to try to get in the door with them.
Nice.
And I know that I had to ask you to bump this a little bit later in the afternoon than we had planned, because I woke up this morning to just a shitstorm of stuff, and so my day has been.
What do you mean? Being an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Our normal day of crap. Like,
well, we were doing some pretty deep discussions, and things seemed to be moving in the right direction, and all of a sudden, there were all these obstacles.
Right.
And it was becoming pretty obvious that one person in particular had the ability to either be very pro and positive towards us and us moving it forward, or he could just essentially kill it. So a lot of today was calming down the fire with that person, saying, hey, I'm going to get you new information. Some of the assumptions that are being made right now are not accurate.
Right.
So I'll go in, I'll prove this stuff out to you. Sorry, I'm not a better communicator than I ought to be, and blah, blah, blah. And then, fortunately, I also have a very good champion inside the company. So he and I met to walk through what is actually going on inside the company. How can you say the right things, even though you've said the right things? This is the way you frame them slightly differently to help address the issue. So that's been my day. It was just running around, and with the isolation stuff, I hate this.
Yeah.
I really
it's rough. It's rough.
So,
well, the cool thing is that like you said, these are all things that we all learn and we all adjust. And the best thing about being an entrepreneur, though, is the pivot, and you learn something new every day. And you learn something new every day. Well, Keith Williams, once again, man, thank you so much for coming on the GrindMode show.
Thank you.
I'm glad that I could get you on here, and that we're going to be doing more shows. I'm going to be actually wanting to do some different workshops and online teachings and platforms, or what do you want to call them? Q&As and things with groups and people. I'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely.
Of course. Awesome. And so we could talk more and delve into individual topics, because I know you're like me. We both like to talk. If you guys don't know or couldn't tell. Yeah, we both actually really like talking about this stuff. So thank you again, and I appreciate you. And just once again, just thank you for helping me in a lot of ways that you have. So I appreciate you a lot.
Very much for saying that. It's definitely honored for having met you, and it's definitely not a one-way street. I always learn an immense amount from talking with you, and we really ought to plan a more frequent time to get together, because that's just always so much fun when we do.
Yeah, most definitely. See when we can take over or get ourselves in trouble again with next. No. Yeah. That's what's up, Keith. I can tell you the
story about crashing Purdue's phone system.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember that one.
Oh, okay. I don't share that one with everybody.
That's great. All right, Keith. Thank you guys for watching. Keith, don't go anywhere. But everyone else, thank you guys for watching GrindMode. Go follow, subscribe, and also go find Keith. You'll see his information below. And if you have any questions for him, feel free to reach out. And this is GrindMode. Peace.